I will introduce Mr. Sullivan, Boston Water and Sewer Chief Engineer, and he will introduce the panelists and move the inaction workshop forward. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Again, my name is John Sullivan. I work for the Boston Water and Sewer Commission. Been there 42 years, been through thousands of rate increases and other things like that. We have very exciting residents. We do not yet charge a stormwater fee. We would prefer if all of you could implement them, and then we could point to you. I think one comment I want to make is we heard about all the ways you can do it, and and I really appreciate the way MAPC has a toolbox. But one thing you got to remember: first, the MS4 permit's out. It's out for draft. You've got to December to comment. There's 4 public hearings. You should attend because you have no clue how much money this thing's going to cost you. You may be the greatest. You think you're the greatest stormwater utility. When you start spending that money, watch how much. Now, you're going to get that toolbox. You're going to run out and you're going to calculate the fee for all you collectors and treasurers and all that, and you're all excited. How much money does it cost you to meet the permit requirements? You're not going to know that for about 4 years. So this is going to be a really exciting time in Massachusetts. We have a Phase 1 permit. We're not counting this one, and we're also sued, and we have a consent decree. So, maybe you too can get sued. So we have a consent decree. We know what we need to do. There is time limits in all this. And so when you see all this, you kind of go, yeah, we can get to that. It doesn't quite work that way. Under permits, you have a time to get it done. Now, you do get a chance to go back and say, here's why I can't. You can't say it's because I don't have the money. You got to show good faith. So this isn't as easy as you think. I know when it rains out, most of it goes away, so you think success. But it's if you have a TMDL on the river, and although you with the Charles River, wait till you see the excitement of getting rid of phosphorus. Our preliminary numbers range, and this is only for the Charles River drainage we have, range from $230 million to $800 million over 30 years to take care of just phosphorus. Try to take care of bacteria. Virtually impossible unless you kill the geese and eat the dogs. That's about it. It just goes on, and that's why public education is important, but the geese are everywhere, and we shoo them over to Brookline whenever possible, so that's a very important thing. This afternoon, we have the practitioners, people who have gone ahead already and have got a stormwater fee in place or are implementing it, and they've had all the excitement and they've had the beatings. Now, what we'll do is we'll have each one of them give you a little discussion of where they are and what they're doing. We'll let you get up and fire questions at them, but after each one. So what I'm going to do, and I'm not sure, well, I know which way I'll do it. I'll do it the way I'm told to do it. The City of Gloucester, we have Michael Hale. He's Director of Public Works. And what I love is I have an underlined thing here. He says he's under the watchful eye of Mass DEP and EPA, which is appropriate. He doesn't have a consent decree yet on that. He has extremely high rates in Gloucester. And, of course, one of the problems is if you've got a high water and sewer rate, and now you're going to tell people you get to pay for rainwater, because they call it the rain tax, and you don't do it right, it will be exciting. And between all of this, and, we're all environmentalists, we want to do the right thing, there's a little thing called politics, city councils, town managers, et cetera. So with that, I'm not going to jump in too much what I've been given here for Michael. I'm going to let him describe to you where he's at, what he's doing, and why you should feel bad for him. Michael.
Thank you very much. We don't have a consent decree. We have multiple consent decrees, EPA and DEP. And a lot of that has to do with the way we've funded our utilities over the years. We've had artificially low water and sewer rates for decades. Kind of at the beginning of the discussion, I walked in talking about the cost of water, the cost of providing sewer services. Gloucester managed to keep their rates remarkably low all through the 80s and 90s into the beginning part of the 2000s. We have extremely high rates now. We're over $20 combined last year. We actually did we shifted some of our water and sewer debt from our enterprise funds to our general funds, which is something that most communities don't know how to do. It's a provision that allows you to do a one-time shift outside of the 2.5 cap by a vote of your city council, whomever else would be your administrative branch within your communities. So I've shifted probably close to $80 million in the last few years of water and sewer debt from the enterprise directly to the general fund tax base, which is fine for most homeowners, but the property owners who have the big houses along the water are paying a significantly higher tax rate than the rest of us right now. We are a regulated community. We're in year, 11 of the 5-year permit right now. We adopted a stormwater utility by ordinance in 2010. We have not implemented it. The reason for that is it's a little bit unclear to me, but I suspect it had to do with the election that year. It's difficult to implement another fee to a community that's already paying extremely high water and sewer rates. I think we have a very good model based for our fee base for water, for our stormwater utility. It's a traditional ERU-based system. We glossed a lot of multifamily homes downtown. We did a pretty good takeoff on the impervious area of single-family through multifamilies in our downtown area. Not a significance, 1, 2, even the 4-family dwellings downtown don't have a significantly higher impervious area than the single families in the suburbs of the city. We're about 60% single-family residential, and then we increment very small up to about 90% total for residential. We don't have a lot of commercial. We have about 9% commercial and industrial in the city of Gloucester. We're isolated from a location at the end of 128. It's difficult to get businesses there. There's a fear that implementing another fee to these businesses, which will pay a much higher rate, because we actually looked at the actual impervious area of each commercial and industrial property. Is it a big number? No, but could it discourage the growth of the local economy? I think that was certainly a fear, and it's another reason why it hasn't yet to be implemented. But looking at the draft regulations right now, I think we're very close to having to pull the trigger on this and getting the utility up and running once and for all.
A real quick question on the utility. Is it all passed? You've got your ordinances in place and?
The ordinance is in place, which gives us the authority to have a stormwater utility. It's the regulation, which will be through my office, again, adopted by our city council, that'll give some of the finer detail to how the ordinance is implemented.
And one of the questions I always have for smaller towns versus larger cities, if you don't have a lot of commercial and residential, is it all about the same? Should one flat fee be applied to everyone? Or are you going to try into using ERUs work on the large businesses? Or have you decided?
Well, again, the ERUs would be, for a single-family home, they'd pay, it's an average on the impervious area. And then we have a multiplier based on a 2-family pays a half per unit, so they're only paying 1. A 3-family would pay 1.5 ERUs. 4-family would pay 2. But then once you get to industrial and commercial, you're not using an average, you're using the actual impervious area based on a GIS mapping. And it's significantly higher.
Do you anticipate an abatement program?
We anticipated an abatement program. That would be part of the regulation, as well as some sort of credit program, both setups. It's difficult to understand having a budget, which you'd set the budget beginning of the fiscal year for your stormwater plan, then have abatements come in midway through the year is difficult to manage, because that is less revenue you have to implement your operations.
Right. And my finally, and I just asked these questions because I was told to keep this lively. My final question was, when you get this, you got the new MS4 coming out. Do you think the new MS4 permit regulations are going to double your stormwater cost, or do you think you're there because you're doing such a great job and life is good?
Well, life's never really that good to talk about utilities. I mean, we've had a lot of deferred maintenance on our stormwater system over the years. I mean, it just had to be. We just spent about $50 million on some CSO abatement. Doesn't sound like a lot of money to someone like you, but when you have a very small community, it's significant. Well, an entity.
Yeah, a lot of things sound different to someone like me. Next, for town of Reading, which is another interesting study because they did it all in-house, we have Kim Honetschlager. Is that correct? Winner. GIS coordinator for the town. And they have a stormwater enterprise fund, and perhaps you could describe to us what you've done and where you are as far as challenging your residents to kick in.
Okay. Reading established a stormwater utility in 2006, and we started billing people a quarterly stormwater fee in that same year. It took us all told about 3 years to go through this process, from first setting up, we had a water and sewer advisory committee, we added stormwater to their responsibility. So it was that committee, myself, town engineer, the town accountant, the DPW director, all working sort of back and forth, looking at different issues that have already been raised. For the most part, makes my job easy. You know, the regulatory issues, the environmental issues, the budget, just the technical GIS stuff, which was my piece. So it took us a while. About 3 years start to finish, as I said. We did 2 presentations before town meeting, just informational to soften them up. And then it took us 2 tries to get through town meeting because of some sort of setbacks and challenges. We had a legal challenge by a couple of residents. Some of those, I think, some of the issues we dealt with, because we're a little ahead of the curve, you've got the MAPC toolkit now. You won't hopefully have to deal with all of those same issues. We were looking to come up with a stormwater fee that's equitable, that was legally defensible, and that was relatively easy to implement, and sometimes those things are at cross purposes. What we ended up with is a flat fee based on the average amount for residential, and by residential we mean 1- and 2-family homes. That's based on the average amount of impervious surface for those properties. And then commercial and industrial, multifamily properties are some multiple of that. We use GIS to do a fair amount of research on how difficult it would be to measure impervious surface, for example. We're not using this mass GIS data, we're using our own local GIS data, building footprints, driveways, parking areas primarily. We bill, and so we use GIS for some of the initial calculations to look at equity, to look at average amounts of stormwater, or impervious, I'm sorry, on residential properties. And what we found, for residential properties all across town, the average amount of impervious doesn't vary very much. It's very strongly centered around a mean of about 3,200 square feet. So that gave us the confidence to establish a flat fee for residential. And then commercial and industrial, it just is from here to there, just incredible variation. So we couldn't see how a flat fee would have been equitable, so we didn't go that route. We do have an abatement system of up to 50% of the fee if a property, commercial or residential, is using state-of-the-art either infiltration or stormwater system. So new developments generally get that 50% abatement. We bill all developed properties, including the schools, including a state guard reservation. How we got through town meeting? Well, interestingly, the committee and those of us working on this, going back and forth between the selectmen, giving presentations to the town meeting, a couple of issues came up. It became apparent that we weren't going to be able to cover all of our new stormwater fees, or all the new requirements for the NIPD's Phase 2 permit and for all the deferred maintenance. We couldn't just put this all on a fee. It was higher than the squeal point. It was going to cost too much. So the committee promised the selectmen that they would cap the stormwater fee at $40 per household. Per quarter? Per year, and then we bill quarterly. And then the second thing they decided to do, since the new fee in the Stormwater Enterprise Fund wouldn't cover everything we wanted to cover, is that we made a decision that the Stormwater Enterprise Fund would only cover new things we're not doing now. So deferred maintenance, NIPD's fee, costs, some new staff, and some new equipment. And the fact that we made those commitments, I think, helped us get through town meeting then, because the fear that here's this new fee and it's just going to go up and up and up. Once we got our foot in the door, we were going to raise it every year, was somewhat allayed. But it also caps the amount of revenue that we can raise every year. So the general fund is still paying for the sort of thing we are already doing, the stormwater fee that pays for the new stuff. The other thing I think that helped us get through town meeting is that we have an elected town meeting. They've all seen budgets come and go. They know that every year we push those big capital projects out and we just don't quite get to the little drainage projects because there's some new police officers, some firefighters, and some school teachers that are a lot easier to fund than, nobody's up there clamoring for more stormwater stuff. So let's see, what else can I tell you? That we raise about $380 $100,000 annually with the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. We did a lot of public education, pretty unsophisticated, frequently asked questions, some PowerPoint presentations. We trained our staff before the bills hit. We added our stormwater fee to the water and sewer bill, which is already combined. We are fully sewered, so almost every developed property gets a water and sewer bill, so adding the stormwater fee was reasonable. The abatements go right into that system. If new development happens on a commercial or industrial site, they will have gone through a site plan review process, so we have the plans that tells us how much new impervious is going to be there. So even though our analysis was based on 2008 aerial photos and the GIS data that came from those aerial photos, new development on the commercial and industrial side gets recalculated either, well, from those plans, or we send one of the engineers out there to calculate the new amount. We actually have had to, we're not having that much development, and if we miss somebody, they don't come running in and say, oh, you're undercharging me, so it hasn't been that onerous. You know, getting through town meeting, they complained a lot, and then they just took their medicine. And it's pretty non-controversial now. We look back, and it's a surprise. I can talk about GIS issues if anyone has them, but, you know, maybe after the panel. What else
So,
would you like?
do you bill your schools and libraries?
Yeah?
You do?
And
So-
some, like Conservation Commission, for example, if they have a parking lot on one of their properties, they've never been billed anything for that. That's a bit of a shock.
And if you had conservation land that actually was a hill and it ran off to your MS4, but it had no impervious, do they waltz, or do they?
We're charging for the amount of impervious, so they
So it's
waltz.
Okay. So there's no squawk at all from the libraries and,
Well, they squawked.
so if you give an abatement, do you have any kind of, or anticipating a grant program so that if somebody wants to lower their $40 fee to $20 a year and they want to put in a rain garden, do you have a program to help them get that done?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
And we sell a lot of rain barrels, and those don't qualify at this point. So I think it's probably time to look at some more incentives. I should also say we have a $200,000 reserve fund for those big projects that we know are coming.
Yeah, I was in Denver last week, and we were talking rain barrels. They don't know what rain is, but there's a real problem out there. And what I didn't know, it's illegal in Colorado to have a rain barrel, because when the water falls on that roof, it belongs to the county, not to you. And you're stealing from the county if you have a rain barrel. We're going to adopt that ordinance in our city, so I'm not sure how that works. Question?
Hi, question for Reading. I may have missed it, but do you, you were saying you have, you're using the enterprise fund only for new stuff, so how are you funding the old stuff?
It's still in the general fund.
Okay.
So we come up with two different budgets and try to cover what we can.
How does that work for you?
I think it works okay. I mean, I'm not the budget person, but I think it works pretty well.
I'm assuming the tax exempt properties also pay water and sewer services in your town?
Yeah, and the stormwater, we did have one of the issues that came up early on was some of the tax exempt properties didn't think they should have to pay this fee, but they pay water, they pay sewer, they pay a stormwater fee too.
Right, and but with the tax exempts, of course, for the old stuff you gotta take care of, it's gonna be the homeowner picking up the money, since they don't pay taxes, right?
Right, yeah.
One of the fears I have, in the city is, you know, in the city of Boston, we have Roman Catholic churches everywhere, and they have the largest parking lots you've ever seen. They've got a rectory, they've got an old school building, and they got 9 people that go there every Sunday. So we don't get a lot of money from these guys for water sewer services. So I suspect, Holly, there'll be a third collection in the city of Boston every week, and they'll probably name it after me if I'm still there. We don't know. All right, the third panelist is Lou Taverna. He's a member of the advisory board, and he's with Newton, and he'll fill you in on where they are and what they've done so far.
Thanks. Yeah, Newton did something very similar to Reading back in 2006. We recognized that we needed a stormwater enterprise account system because before that we were spending virtually nothing on our stormwater system. You know, if the drain pipe broke, we'd fix it, but we'd have to go to free cash to get the money even to fix it. So even that was challenging because we're competing with the fire trucks and everything else that had to be bought. And pardon my Watertown accent too, sir. I'm born and raised in Watertown, so pardon me. But something similar to what Reading did, we chose, and it was more of a political decision, a flat fee way of doing it. The first time we wanted to crawl before we walked and walk before we ran. So we chose the flat fee method based on, you know, one equivalent unit. And we determined that $25 per year per household was tolerable when you compare that to your cable TV bill and your cell phone bill, which is more than $25 a month for cell phone service. We thought that $25 a year was reasonable. We looked at the impervious area of some sample residential, and we looked at the impervious area of some sample commercial properties in Newton, and determined, with all the mathematics we did, that the commercial properties are about 6 times more impervious than the residential units, so we're going to charge them 6 times more. So we charge the residents $25 a year, and we charge the commercial people $150 per year. Well, fast forward to 2014, let me back up one more. That system generated, of course, a flat fee per year, about $750,000 per year to fund the enterprise account. Well, that didn't quite fund the enterprise account, of course, because our costs were much more than that. If you take in capital costs, that funded like a 4-man crew plus a stormwater engineer, plus the catch basin cleanings that we clean, catch basins once every 2 years, plus a small capital project here and there, but it still wasn't enough to do what we really needed to do. So we hired one of the local consulting engineering firms to kind of develop a stormwater plan for us for the future as we move forward. And they determined, well, obviously the $750,000 isn't enough, and if you really want to catch up on all your deferred maintenance and all the issues that Newton has with flooding hotspots and culverts and drains and retaining walls and everything else that happens, you really need to bump up what that revenue is. So what we're looking at now is something even more equitable. We're still going to maintain the flat fee for the residential unit, but we are going to go to the impervious area for the commercial units. We thought about doing it all, doing also the residential properties on an impervious basis area. We now have a sophisticated GIS that we probably could do it. They flew the city, fly over in 2012 or 14. We probably could do it. We're very concerned about challenges. We have 25,000 households in Newton. I'm not sure how much Reading has or Gloucester has, but to us that's a lot. If we got challenged by those 25,000 people, that would keep our customer service, water sewer billing people busy. So we felt that wasn't probably ideal at this point in time. So we're going to stick with the flat fee for the residential properties, but go to the impervious for the commercials. What we thought was that a lot of people in the residential would challenge us. Well, my lot slopes toward the backyard. It doesn't slope toward the street. So all my stormwater that falls on my house goes in the backyard and gets infiltrated. Why am I paying the stormwater fee? So we felt that there'd be many, many challenges if we went that way. So we stuck to the $60. So we stuck to the flat fee. We wanted to raise the fee. We feel with the numbers being bounced around now, and they're not official yet, but they've been discussed in Newton, is around $60 per residential unit, and then based on your impervious area of your commercial property, it would be multiples of $25. So if you had 8 times as much impermeable area as a typical household, you'd pay you'd pay the $60 plus 8 times 25, which is $200. You pay $260. We determined, again, through GIS mapping, that the average equivalent unit for a Newton household was about 2,600 square feet. And we looked at small properties, medium-sized properties, and large properties. And when you look at them, there's really not that much of a difference. Even though you have a large house in Chestnut Hill, that house footprint compared to your lot in Chestnut Hill, the proportions are about the same as a medium-sized house in another portion of town, or even a small house in some other portion of town. So when you look at the proportional area, it's all about the same. Maybe it's 2,650, maybe it's 2,550, but in reality, it's all about the same. So we round up to 2,600 square feet. And that's what we're kind of moving forward on. This, we feel, if and when this is implemented, and we're trying to implement it for a July 1 kickoff, if this gets implemented, we feel we can generate around $2 million to $2.5 million worth of revenue, which will certainly pay for the operating costs, and we'll have enough money left over for the capital costs to catch up on all the 100 years of deferred maintenance. The drainage system in Newton was installed 100 years ago, 140 years ago, never been touched. So we have some big drainage problems. So, thanks.
So Lou, you mentioned $2.5 million. Have you looked at the new MS4 requirements, and will that cover the new ones?
We are looking at them now, and the short answer is we're not sure. We really don't know. If you look at Newton geographically, it's a peninsula that sticks out into the Charles River. I have 150 outfalls that outfall directly into the Charles River. I got an additional 14 miles of brooks and streams in Newton. All will be regulated by the new MS4 permit. We're worried about phosphorus. We're in the Charles River Basin, so phosphorus is a big concern. We really don't know. It's kind of a wait and see. We don't know how much of it. We have a current NIPD's permit, but we really don't know what these additional requirements are going to cost.
One of the things I want to bring up real quick, you keep hearing the dollars, money, $40, $50, whatever. Going to monthly billing is something we did 10 years ago, and that works wonders, because anything divided by 12 looks a lot smaller than anything divided by 4 or 6. It's better cash flow. It also allows your customers not to get in trouble, because they're reminded each month. You're always on their case. All these new metering systems help you do it. So I just bring that out as this goes further up, and these fees you're hearing, $40, go ahead 5 years from now and show me what they look like after everyone's starting to implement these.
There is, if I may add, I forgot to mention, there is one glitch in the state law that allows you to implement the stormwater fee. At least it was a glitch in 2006. I don't know if they've corrected it yet, but you can only bill a stormwater fee to those residents who receive a water sewer bill, particularly on the sewer bill. So the town of Weston, and I think, is out of luck, because nobody in Weston has a sewer, so then no one gets a sewer bill, so they may be out of luck unless that state law has changed, and I don't know that for a fact. In Newton, we got a couple hundred residences who are still on septic systems, so they don't get a sewer bill. They get a water bill but not a sewer bill, so they do not get a stormwater fee bill as well. So there's a little glitch in the law, and I'm not sure if they corrected it, unless you know something.
That was changed in 2000.
Yeah.
It may have been.
Because you're right.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question for Lou on the, related to John's question on the 2 to 2.5 million, and your deferred capital costs. Is there any set aside for things like green infrastructure to keep the phosphorus from coming in the first place?
Well, certainly, that would be part of the, part of the capital plan. Once we digest, the NIPD's permit, the upcoming NIPD's permit, then yeah, there would be capital outlay, set aside for those things, particularly around, the ponds and the lakes that we have, Crystal Lake and Hammond Pond, that are really critical, as well as the Charles River as well.
That's true. And the other question I have for all of the panelists is whether, who's on monthly billing and who's doing quarterly and who's doing, at what frequency are you billing the stormwater fee?
Well, it's quarterly for water, sewer, and we'd imagine that the stormwater utility would be billed the same way.
We're quarterly as well.
Yeah, Newton's quarterly as well, although with the new meter reading system we just installed a few years ago, we're looking at monthly billing, but we're not there yet.
It's probably not as applicable to like flat fee based systems, but those that are based on impervious area. Have any of you run into issues where an MS4 that is ours isn't necessarily the only MS4 that's in the system? Meaning like a state drain, state highway drain, may go into a DCR drain, which flows into us, which in turn flows back into another system. Maybe yours, John.
Oh, yeah, we got plenty of that.
And what sort of equity is thought about as far as carving that up, that, you know, maybe a person's discharge from their property is to somebody else's MS4, but ultimately flows through ours?
I don't know if we tackled that or not. I know we did tackle the issue of, well, what if my property happens to be a complete bowl, and so no water actually runs off, and our argument there was that you're still driving on the streets, and you're causing pollution to go in through the drainage system that way. Otherwise, I can't answer.
Again, we haven't implemented the utility in Gloucester, but in the development of it, we certainly thought of Mass DOT. 128, 133, and 127 all run through Gloucester. And all the surrounding properties drain to those state roads, and those state roads drain into typically something that we own. So we didn't think of any abatement process or any relief from those property owners just because they didn't drain directly to us. The end result is it's going to be in our system at some point.
I think the question there is, and that's something we're looking at, we're not part of the city. We were thrown out in 1977, and we bill them for everything. But one of the biggest problems of stormwater is the pollution from the city streets, and if you don't sweep them enough, it causes additional problems. But most of the phosphorus, at least I've been told, I've never seen it in writing, comes from parking lots and streets. So we're looking at, what do we do with the city streets? Never mind the Mass Highway and the DCR. What do we do with the city streets alone? I mean, you know, every building in the city borders one of them. Of course, if you build them, that simply goes all the way back to the tax-paying homeowners, not the tax exempts. So now it begins an equity. So where do you collect the money from? At the end of the day, it's the people living in the cities and towns that are going to support it. So that's a real dilemma for us. I think one of the ways out of it may be, whether you know it or not, your street is part of your conveyance system on your stormwater. It's, the gutters are just like the storm drain in the street. So there's all little nuances, but as you try to collect these large fees, trying to be equitable gets very difficult because everyone has a special excuse. And most of those people live in Boston, but they will be moving out and into these mansions wherever. So I just bring that up. That's another thing to remember, this whole issue of city streets.
Yeah, the same thing applies to parking lots too as well. And Newton has, you know, public parking lots that aren't associated with a building. They don't get a water sewer bill. They're just public parking lots with a parking meter in them. So how do we equity bill them? I mean, we're not quite sure. So you have to think about that too.
So for all the panelists, and recognizing that it's a very imprecise yardstick, have you looked at both the incremental stormwater costs and the overall envelope of water charges against median household income and how that plays out in your communities?
We have used water and sewer charges against median household income on a lot of arguments we've had with EPA. We were under, again, for a small community with 30,000 people, about 10,000 housing units. I met with Raf Tellis years ago, perhaps both of you down in Providence. When I express the number of customers that we have, it's hard to divide up a big number with only a few customers. That's why our water and sewer bills are so high. The regulators don't seem to care too much, even with that excuse. You can't afford to pay for it. The MS4, as a regulated community in the last 11 years, we've tried our best to manage our stormwater costs within our general fund and, to some degree, our sewer enterprise fund. It's not enough. It really isn't. We're not getting any further ahead in the system, so we have to do something. I don't think that a small stormwater utility expense is going to break anyone's bank, so to speak. Unfortunately, my city council wants to remove from the sewer charge what we implement on the stormwater charge. That gets me no further ahead. If we're taking an average of $50 off a year on the sewer fee, supplementing it with the utility, stormwater utility, doesn't help me. I need both of them. I need the sewer to be fully funded, which is underfunded now, and I need the stormwater utility fully funded, which isn't funded at all right now.
I'm not sure if we did any analysis with the stormwater fee relative to income. I think part of the $40 cap, which we have stuck with, since 2006 was our argument against having to do that work, perhaps, that it's not an onerous fee. I'm not sure if that answers your question. That's as close as I can get.
Yeah, and in Newton, we really didn't look at that, but we do have, the senior citizen discount on the water sewer bill. If they're senior citizens with a low income, they get a 30% discount. That also applies to the stormwater fee because it's all on the same bill, but that's about the extent of it. So.
There was a discussion last week with the Sanitary District of Northern Kentucky. Now, I know you're all familiar with that. They actually has a consent decree, and they've got their CSO problems, and they've got this rainwater problem and BMPs, and some happy administration signed everything and then left town. The new guys went in and they took a look, and if you take the average affordability, they can afford it. The problem is, all the rich people live over here, and they don't really care, and there's certain wards and districts that have real big problems, and they can't. So they've now challenged EPA, and EPA has actually agreed it's a problem. They have suggested the sanitation district solve it for us, and then maybe we'll take it back. So I know November 4th is a meeting in DC that I'm attending on affordability for cities that have such discrepancies from people like we might have in North Dorchester. They don't have a lot of money, they're just getting by, whether they're retirees or just don't make a lot of money. And the people moving onto the waterfront where your condo is 1.3 million. So there is a discrepancy. How we can equitably distribute those costs really becomes our challenge, because the EPA is saying in our case, we can't break it up. So we're watching that particular issue. It's in another region, and what's amazing about EPA, it's one unit, except there's 10 regions, and they're all independent. So I'm not sure how this thing gets worked out, whether someone winds up suing, which is the way, I guess that's the way we do life now, just sue somebody, and whether that'll be worked out that way. So it's a really ongoing affordability thing, and the guys in Northern Kentucky are the guys really pushing it, because of the exact reason that you mentioned, the affordability.
I'm Paul Lauenstein from Sharon. I just want to ask the panelists, what, if any, incentives do you have for stormwater BMPs like rain gardens and that sort of thing? And if you don't have any, what would be like in your mind for the future that might be effective to help get water back into the ground?
Again, we don't charge the utility currently. What Gloucester does have, and I think my former engineer is not here anymore, Gloucester is a very low threshold for stormwater management. Any development over 500 square feet, so you put a garage, a small addition on your house, you're submitting an engineered plan to us to manage your stormwater, and we encourage it to be recharged. So that's from the smallest building envelope up to a major development, which we don't have very many of those, but that is our incentive, to have it dealt with during the construction of it. What's already built is built. Again, we don't have an abatement program in place or a credit program in place for that. It's contemplated, but we try to start during the building permitting process by a solid engineering plan submitted to us.
I think that's true for us for the commercial and industrial side. Any new development is going to have modern, up-to-date, state-of-the-art, hopefully, stormwater treatment system. On the residential side, it's really just infiltration. So if you're infiltrating all your downspouts, then we'll send an engineer out, look at it, and then you could get up to 50% on abatement. But if you've got a driveway and some parking area that's paved too, you're probably not going to get quite that full 50%. Basically, and that 50% is the max abatement you can get on for any property. So any new development is almost by definition getting that 50% abatement. I think we could look at that again, especially on the residential side, to encourage rain barrels and water gardens and such.
Yeah, the same applies to Newton. We also offer the abatement, and we thought we had to because it's a fee, not a tax. So you have to have an option to opt out of it. So we do have the same abatement program up to 50% if you contain your stormwater on site. The issue is though, what's the payback? If it wouldn't be really a payback for a homeowner to spend $3,000 to $5,000 on an elaborate vortex stormwater unit on a site, to save $60 a year on a stormwater fee, because the payback is hundreds of years. year, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. But for the commercial properties, yeah, it does make a lot of sense. And same as Reading, we do require them to contain all the stormwater on site up to the 100-year storm. So there are abatements being offered in that case. The only subsidy, though, is really the rain barrel, which we buy bulk, so we can subsidize the payment to the residents of Newton who want to buy them. But that's kind of the only really subsidy incentive that we offer above and beyond the abatement. So.
In Boston, we've been making them hold 1 inch of rain and infiltrate it. You have to do that. That takes care of our phosphorus requirement on all new. And then if you are substantially rehabbing your property, whatever that means, you also have to do it. It depends if you come in and talk to us, then we got you. We encourage you because we tell them the fee's coming. When you're spending all this money now, spend the money, do it right. We encourage them if you get to 1 inch, which is what we're going to use, if you can hold and manage the first inch of water. The rest we take. One of the other problems I see coming up on this is that every time it rains out, everyone says I have major floods. That means maybe a catch basin isn't taking water. It's raining hotter, in case you haven't noticed, and what's going to happen in about 10 years when these intense storms come and people start complaining, I've been paying you for this stormwater, I'm getting flooded, what are you going to do about it? So you got to keep this in mind all along as you're telling people, constantly tell them, this is the stormwater fee, it's mostly water quality, it's not all, volume, and tell them it's gonna flood more. I mean, it's something that's going on. As soon as people pay you for it, I pay your salary. There's billions of people in the city pay my salary. It's unbelievable if they'd only cash in. The problem is people have high expectations, and your job through the public education is to manage their expectations, let them understand what they are getting and what they're not getting.
Okay, Lou, did you say you're upping the fee to $60?
Yes, it's currently $25 per year. We're going to up it to around, it's not official yet, but it's around $60 a year.
And what's your response to the people that say their water runs off into a neighbor's property or to their backyard?
Well, again, they use the public parking lots, they use the public roads, so then you kind of explain it that way. This isn't easy. It's not an easy thing to set up. It's not an easy thing to sell. You have to convince them that they use the roads, their driveway drains down to the road. There's a catch basin in front of their house, so they get the benefit of that catch basin use. And we had some canned answers that I didn't bring with me, but it isn't easy. It's not. If there are some parting words with this, those of you contemplating this is not easy. You really got to do your homework. You got to have a plan. You got to have some canned answers out there because be a lot of challenges. We were called every name in the book. The rain tax. Every time it rains, I got to write a check to the city of Newton. It was every possible bad thing that they could possibly think of.
Okay, and then to all of you, what do you do if someone says, we can't infiltrate because our site is contaminated? Is there any type of trade-off? Are they providing credits to do some work off-site, perhaps?
We've had very few requests for abatements, and that's one that I haven't heard of coming up. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't had any abatement requests based on contamination. Maybe there isn't that much contamination in Newton, but there is with gas stations, I would imagine, but we really haven't had that much.
Because I know in Medford we have projects underway that are formerly brownfield sites, and they say that they can't, either because the site was treated to the extent that the soil is fixed, or trying to infiltrate would cause more problems. So what about the city of Boston? I imagine you have some sites.
We've exempted people. There's some really nasty stuff underground in certain areas. And if you try to infiltrate it or something, move it. But we have encouraged them to take the rain roof water, which has already got gravity on its side, and build artificial wetlands, little ponds, and that they can manage. So we have, trying to get 1 inch of water. In the commercial sites, that doesn't go over as big as it could. But we have to envelop a fee. So we tell them when the fees come, you certainly will be paying your fair share. So you're not going to win. We also have the people in West Roxbury where they're all built right on granite. I mean, they've got 2 inches of lawn. And the good news is they water a lot. So you can't infiltrate that. And so that gets very difficult, and they're going to have to be exempted. That's where the full fee will hit them. So they will get no exemption.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, hearing no more questions and knowing that you all get to drive out in stormwater now, that's awesome. I'd like to thank the panelists for today's answers. And I'm sure Joe will have another one of these when some of you start it, and some of you will be sitting up here wondering why you ever took this advice. Thank you.
Again, as we're wrapping up, I just, once again, to our presenters and our panelists, thank you for, I learned a lot today. Hopefully everyone else in the audience did as well. Well, from the advisory board, I just want to thank you.